I just wanted every bride to feel beautiful, Angela whispered, tears streaming down her face. But Ellen wasn't about to let this 62-year-old seamstress minimize what she had just confessed to doing for 30 years. Behind the doors of a modest Brooklyn alteration shop, something extraordinary had been happening, and the world was about to find out. The studio hummed with anticipation as Ellen finished her opening monologue about the challenges of parallel parking. The audience was still laughing, the energy was high, and the California sunshine streaming through the windows seemed to promise that this would be one of those special shows that people would remember long after the credits rolled. Michael Rodriguez sat in the green room, his hands folded neatly in his lap, wearing the nicest clothes he owned. A simple navy blue suit that he had purchased second-hand specifically for this appearance. At 42, Michael had the kind of face that people often overlooked. Gentle dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, graying hair that he kept meticulously neat, and the quiet demeanor of someone who preferred to observe rather than be observed. Michael had never imagined he would be sitting backstage at the Ellen DeGeneres show. 3 weeks earlier, a producer had called him at home, explaining that someone had nominated him for their Everyday Angels segment. Michael had been confused. He couldn't think of anything he had done that would warrant such attention. He worked as a night shift custodian at St. Mary's Children's Hospital, went home to his small apartment, and lived a quiet, simple life. What could possibly be interesting about that? What Michael didn't know was that his story had come to the show's attention through a series of conversations that had started in the hospital's billing department. For months, administrators had been puzzled by anonymous payments showing up for various patient families, parking fees, cafeteria bills, and small comfort items from the gift shop. The payments always came with a simple note, "From someone who cares." The mystery had intrigued everyone so much that the hospital's head of patient services had written to Ellen's show, hoping to find the anonymous donor and thank them properly. "Michael Rodriguez, you're ready in 5 minutes," a production assistant announced. Michael nodded, took a deep breath, and straightened his tie one more time. He still wasn't entirely sure why he was here, but he trusted that everything would work out as it was meant to. Ellen's introduction was warm and intriguing. "My next guest is someone who proves that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear hospital uniforms and work the night shift. He's been nominated as an everyday angel, though I suspect he has no idea why. Please welcome Michael Rodriguez." The audience applauded as Michael walked onto the stage, his nervousness evident but endearing. Ellen greeted him with her signature hug and immediately sensed the genuine humility radiating from this man. "Michael, thank you for being here," Ellen said, as they settled onto the familiar white couch. "Tell me about your work at St. Mary's Children's Hospital." Michael's face lit up with quiet pride. "I've been working there for 10 years as a custodian on the night shift. It's a beautiful hospital. They specialize in treating children with serious illnesses. My job is to keep everything clean and safe for the kids and their families." Ellen leaned forward with interest. "That must be emotionally challenging work, being around sick children every day." "It can be," Michael admitted, "but it's also incredibly rewarding. These kids are so brave, so strong, and their families, they're going through the hardest times of their lives, but they never stop fighting, never stop hoping. It's inspiring to be around that kind of love and determination." Ellen studied Michael's face, noting the genuine emotion in his voice. "You work the night shift, which means you see families at their most vulnerable moments." "Yes," Michael said quietly. "Night shifts can be difficult for families. The kids might not be sleeping well, parents are exhausted, and everything feels more overwhelming in the dark. But there's also something beautiful about the night shift. It's quieter, more intimate. You get to see the real moments, the tender ones." "Tell me about some of those moments," Ellen encouraged gently. Michael paused, clearly choosing his words carefully. I see fathers sleeping in uncomfortable chairs because they won't leave their child's bedside. I see mothers who haven't eaten all day because they're too worried to think about food. I see grandparents driving hours every night just to read bedtime stories to their grandchildren. And I see families struggling with more than just medical issues. Ellen sensed there was more to this story. What do you mean by struggling with more than medical issues? Well, Michael said hesitantly, serious childhood illnesses are expensive. Even with insurance, families often face financial hardship. I see parents counting change for parking meters, skipping meals to save money, or looking exhausted because they can't afford a decent hotel room and they're sleeping in their cars. The studio had grown noticeably quieter. Ellen felt that familiar tightness in her chest that always preceded her most meaningful interviews. That must be heartbreaking to witness, Ellen said softly. It is, Michael replied. But you realize that these families are dealing with something so much bigger than money. They're fighting for their children's lives. The last thing they should have to worry about is whether they can afford parking or a cup of coffee. Ellen paused, studying Michael's expression. There was something in his tone, something that suggested this wasn't just observation, this was personal knowledge. Michael, Ellen said carefully, is there anything you've done to help these families? Michael looked down at his hands, then back up at Ellen with the kind of honesty that only comes from someone who has never learned to be anything but truthful. I do what I can, he said simply. Sometimes I might help carry bags or stay with a child for a few minutes so a parent can take a break. Little things. Ellen's producer instincts were telling her there was much more to this story. She decided to take a different approach. Michael, we received a letter from your hospital's administration. They mentioned something about mysterious anonymous donations that have been happening for years. Do you know anything about that? Michael's face flushed slightly, and he looked genuinely surprised. Someone's been making donations? For several years, apparently. Small amounts, but consistent. Parking fees for families, cafeteria bills, gift shop purchases for children, always anonymous, always with a note that says, "From someone who cares." The hospital has been trying to figure out who this person is. Michael was quiet for a long moment, and Ellen could see him wrestling with something internally. That's really wonderful, Michael finally said. Whoever is doing that understands what these families need. Ellen leaned forward, her voice gentle but persistent. Michael, I'm going to ask you directly. Are you the anonymous donor? The silence that followed was deafening. Michael looked at Ellen, then at the audience, then back at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I see these families every night. I see their pain, their worry, their exhaustion. And I thought, if I could take away even one small stress, even something as simple as a parking fee or a meal, maybe it would help. Maybe they could focus entirely on what really matters, loving their child. The studio erupted in applause, but Ellen held up her hand to quiet them. She could see that Michael was overwhelmed by the attention. Michael, how long have you been doing this? About 8 years, he said quietly. Ever since I saw a mother crying in the parking garage because she didn't have enough change for the meter and was afraid her car would be towed while her daughter was in surgery. Ellen's eyes were already filling with tears. And how much of your salary have you been donating? Michael hesitated. It's not about the amount. It's about doing what you can with what you have. But what percentage, Michael? What percentage of your income have you been giving away? About half, Michael admitted, so quietly that the microphones barely picked it up. The audience gasped audibly. Ellen stared at Michael in complete amazement. Half of your salary? For 8 years? Michael, that's incredible. How do you live on the other half? Michael smiled sadly. I don't need much. I have a small apartment. I take the bus to work. I eat simply. I realized a long time ago that I have enough. More than enough. These families, They're spending their life savings trying to save their children. If I can help with parking or a sandwich, it's the least I can do." Ellen stood up abruptly, walked around the coffee table, and pulled Michael into a hug that lasted much longer than her usual television embraces. When she pulled back, she was openly crying. "Michael, you're extraordinary. Do you realize what you've done? For 8 years, you've been secretly carrying the burdens of hundreds of families." "They're not burdens," Michael said quickly. "These families, these children, they're blessings. I get to be a small part of their journey, and that's a privilege." Ellen looked toward her producers in the booth and made the gesture that meant, "Whatever happens next, we're going with it." "Michael, I think there are some people who want to meet you," Ellen announced. Michael looked confused as several people began walking onto the stage from different entrances. First came Dr. Patricia Williams, the chief of pediatrics at St. Mary's. Then came Maria Santos, the head of patient services. Finally, a family of 4 walked onto the stage. Parents with 2 young children. Michael's face went white as he recognized them all. "Dr. Williams!" he exclaimed, standing up quickly. "What are you doing here?" Dr. Williams approached Michael with tears in her eyes. "Michael, we've been trying to figure out the identity of our anonymous angel for years. When Ellen's show contacted us, we finally put the pieces together." Maria Santos stepped forward. "Michael, do you have any idea how many families you've helped? We've been tracking the anonymous donations for the past 8 years. You've helped over 500 families with more than 2,000 individual acts of kindness." Michael looked stunned. "I never kept count. I just saw people who needed help." The family that had walked onto the stage approached Michael tentatively. The father, a man in his 30s, was holding the hand of a young girl who appeared to be about 7 years old. "Mr. Michael," the little girl said in a small voice, "do you remember me?" Michael knelt down to her level, studying her face. "Emma? Emma from room 314? The little girl nodded, beaming. "You paid for our parking every day when I was sick, and you bought me the teddy bear from the gift shop." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "I'm all better now," Emma announced proudly. "The doctor said my cancer is gone." Emma's father stepped forward. "Mr. Rodriguez, you have no idea what your kindness meant to our family. We were so overwhelmed, so scared, and somehow there was always this guardian angel making sure we didn't have to worry about the small things. It let us focus entirely on Emma's treatment." Emma's mother was crying openly. "We never knew who was helping us, but we prayed for you every night. We called you our hospital angel." Ellen was sobbing now, not bothering to hide her emotions. "Michael, do you understand what you've done? You've been a silent guardian angel for hundreds of families during the worst times of their lives." But the surprises weren't over. Dr. Williams stepped forward with an envelope in her hands. "Michael, the hospital board has been discussing what to do when we found our anonymous donor. We want to offer you a new position, patient family advocate. It would involve coordinating support services for families, and it comes with a significant salary increase." Michael stared at the envelope in disbelief. "Dr. Williams, I don't know what to say." "There's more," Ellen announced, reaching for her own checkbook. "Michael, I want to make sure you never have to choose between helping others and taking care of yourself. I'm writing you a check for $100,000. The audience erupted in applause as Ellen handed Michael the check. He stared at it as if it were written in a foreign language. "But Ellen, this is too much. I don't need—" "You don't get to decide what you need anymore," Ellen interrupted with a smile. "You've spent 8 years putting everyone else first. It's time someone put you first." But Ellen wasn't finished. "And Michael, I want to do something else. I'm establishing the Michael Rodriguez Family Support Fund at St. Mary's Hospital. We're going to ensure that no family ever has to worry about parking, meals, or basic comfort items while their child is receiving treatment." Michael sat down heavily on the couch, overwhelmed by everything that was happening. "I just wanted to help," he whispered. "I never expected any of this." Ellen sat beside him and took his hands. Michael, that's exactly why you deserve all of this. You helped because it was right, not because you wanted recognition. You're proof that angels walk among us." 6 months later, Michael had settled into his new role as patient family advocate at St. Mary's. The Michael Rodriguez Family Support Fund had raised over $500,000, ensuring that financial stress would never again compound the emotional stress faced by families dealing with childhood illness. But perhaps the most beautiful change was that Michael was no longer anonymous. Families knew who their guardian angel was, and children throughout the hospital would light up when they saw him in the hallways. He had gone from being an invisible helper to being a visible symbol of hope and kindness. Ellen visited the hospital 3 months after the show and found Michael in his new office, coordinating support services for a family whose child had just been diagnosed with leukemia. His desk was covered with thank you cards from families, photos of children who had recovered, and requests from other hospitals wanting to implement similar programs. "Any regrets about losing your anonymity?" Ellen asked him. Michael smiled, looking at a drawing on his wall that Emma had made for him, a picture of an angel in a hospital uniform with the words, "Thank you, Mr. Michael," written in crayon. "None at all," he said. "I thought anonymity was important because I didn't want thanks. But I realize that allowing people to express gratitude is just as important as offering help. These families need to feel like they can give something back, even if it's just a thank you." The night shift at St. Mary's was still Michael's favorite time, but now, instead of cleaning in solitude, he moved through the halls as a known source of comfort and support. Families would approach him directly when they needed help, and he had become exactly what he had always been, a guardian angel, now working openly in the light instead of secretly in the shadows. Because sometimes the most powerful transformations happen not when someone starts doing good, but when the world finally recognizes the good that someone has been doing all along.